The following program is intended for mature audiences.
Shalom and welcome to the synagogue. This is a podcast for consenting adults for information, education, and entertainment on BDSM, sexuality, and all things related. If you're not a legal, enthusiastically consenting adult, then
pick up the needle, press pause, or turn the radio off.
For those who remain, now might be a good time to switch to your headphones.
Welcome to the synagogue. I am your host. They call me the rabbi.
Pretty fly for a rabbi.
I put the sin in synagogue, and I am a cisgender, ambimorous, gynosexual, sadistic, bratty daddy doll. Sex therapist by day, kink educator by night, and in both these roles I help people make their kink a religious experience. While I am a mental health professional, this podcast is for educational and entertainment purposes only and is not a replacement for therapy. Seek out the assistance of a trained professional for help with your specific situation. Hosting with me today is my partner, my ADHD squirrel wrangler, my submissive, my brat, my little, my pony, or just my little pony, the Siskel to my Ebert, little bit.
Hello, everyone.
This is episode number 4, and with us today is Dave, a.k.a. 2020 hindsight. I always forget if it's 2020 first or 2020 last. And he's here with us today to talk about the topic of DS 101, an introduction to authority transfer relationships. We often hear the terms like DS, authority, and power exchange when talking about kinky relationships. But what do these terms mean, and how can we apply them to our daily lives? Whether you're new to the idea of these kinds of relationships, or you're a longtime veteran looking for a refresher, this discussion can help anyone gain a clear understanding through the context of our personal experiences and stories. But first, a word from our sponsor. Word! Dave, a.k.a. 2020 hindsight. Since entering kink scene in 2008, Dave, he, him, has seen a lifetime's worth of growth. As a former leader of St Louis TNG, a group for kinksters ages 18 through 35, Dave worked to bridge the age gap and provide a safe, welcome, and valued resource to younger or newer members of the lifestyle. Dave serves on STL3's executive board, currently as chair of the membership committee. He is also one of the founders and executive officers of Candy, Queer and Neurodiverse Inclusion, a 501c3 nonprofit organization dedicated to education and creating more fully inclusive spaces. Dave has taught classes in person for a variety of groups and organizations throughout the St. Louis, Missouri area and surrounding regions, and online for groups across the United States. In addition to being a pansexual, polymorous, rope-slinging, needle-piercing, boot-blacking kinkster, Dave also enjoys cigars, whiskey, the Rocky Horror Picture Show, resin crafts, and tabletop RPGs. He can be found on FetLife at fetlife.com/20-20 hindsight.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
Thank you for being here in the synagogue, Dave. Tell us a little bit about authority transfer relationships.
Well, it's a very broad and flexible category. As it kind of said in my class description, there's a lot of ways we can do it and a lot of ways that people can build the structure of their relationship. The 10-second summary, I just kind of define a DS relationship is any interaction between people who have negotiated some transfer of authority and agreed to take on some form of dominant and submissive roles, regardless of the specifics of those negotiations. So whatever, for example, type of relationship structure the two of you have, if you consider it some form of DS or authority transfer relationship may be very, very different from mine or from anybody else's, but it's just as valid if that's what the two of you have consciously decided to build and work towards.
Absolutely.
I like to use the term authority transfer instead of power exchange. They are pretty related, but I do think there are some subtle differences that I like to point out. Power is simply the ability to do something, the ability to make an effect happen or do an action, whereas authority is about the right to decide if that happens or when or by whom. So for good context, authority, or rather power, is the engine of the car, but authority is the driver turning the key. Doesn't matter how much power that engine has, until the driver sits down and decides to use it, that car's not going anywhere.
I like that description. That's
I
very
think
nice.
It's a subtle but important distinction, because then when we can talk about things, because the transfer is in the authority. One or perhaps more, depending on how many people are in the dynamic. Shorthand, I think today we're going to refer to as two people. Obviously, it can be more depending on the people involved and what they want.
Sure.
Since we're largely talking about a dominant party and a submissive party, I think shorthand, we're just going to kind of hand wave and assume we're talking about a two-person dynamic today. The power is always there. Everybody has the ability to do things, to do whatever actions, to affect the relationship. They have an important part of the relationship in that balance. It's not a zero-sum game. Ideally, we should all feel empowered by our relationship. The authority is what's transferred because one party is giving up or ceding some measure of authority for the other to take on. So the two are definitely related terms, but different. And a practical example of the two, in my relationship with my partner, one of the rules we have in place is that they cannot drink alcohol without my permission. They've got the power to do so, obviously. My partner, under their own power, can go to the refrigerator, open up a beer, drink the beer, metabolize it, everything like that. That's all the power. That's the ability they have. They don't have the authority to do it without my approval. I have to say, yes, you can have a drink before they're allowed to. So that's kind of a practical, real-world example of the difference between power and authority within a relationship like this.
And that's something that the two of you have negotiated out for that authority transfer.
Yes, that particular rule is something that we discussed many years ago. That is not something that applies necessarily to any other relationship, many of which don't necessarily even have explicit rules or any specific codified details like that, and that's okay. That's something that we specifically factored into our dynamic for our own needs.
Cool. Thank you.
I think a lot, and I feel like I almost want to back up here because I want to kind of create a couple of more working definitions, because a lot of the terms we're using are either very broad and generic or have a lot of analogs, and other people may use a different term for essentially the same thing. So when I'm referring to dominant and submissive in this context, that's a descriptor, as I said, of authority exchange in this case, but it's not necessarily personality descriptors.
Okay.
Dominant personalities, people who are outgoing, maybe bold, big, in control, like to be in the spotlight. Anybody can have a dominant personality regardless of their role within a relationship or the authority they have in their relationship. I've known plenty of people that I would very much describe as the submissive in their relationship, but they are a dominant personality. They are often the ones in the spotlight, in charge, running things, making things happen. So as an adjective, it can describe a personality type. As a noun, we're using it to describe someone who has or prefers to have the authority in a negotiated relationship. And submissive is the counterpoint to that. As an adjective, it can be a personality descriptor, someone who may be more quiet, meek, reserved, withdrawn, or held back, may not want to be in the spotlight or taking action. Whereas we're using it as a noun to simply mean somebody who has given up or prefers to give up some measure of authority in their relationship. Submissive personality does not mean they are submissive in the relationship and vice versa. Switch is a very broad one because there are many different ways that can apply as well. Because some people may switch between top or bottom when it comes to activities or play, who's giving, who's receiving. They may switch authority and switch from dominant to submissive or vice versa in who has the authority and the control and the right to make the decisions. Some switches may switch with the same partner. It may be, I'm dominant tonight, and then next weekend you're going to be in charge. They may switch with different partners. It may be, I'm dominant with partner A and I'm submissive with partner B, and we each have a separate dynamic like that. Some switches, it may be for certain activities, especially in play, certain types of play, certain activities, certain sensations. You like doing some as a top, you like receiving others as a bottom. So switch can be a broad category. I think it's really important for people to acknowledge that. So if they meet someone or are describing themselves and someone says, I'm a switch, that can mean more, and one shouldn't immediately assume that I switch the same way you switch, even if we both describe ourselves as a switch.
So that should be more of like a, let's have a conversation. What does switch mean for you?
Absolutely. I think one of the most important questions we can ever ask in this lifestyle as a whole, but especially when it comes to building these relationships, these dynamics between people. The most important question we can ask, there's two versions of it. It's what does that mean to me? And then what does that mean to you? To make sure that we're using the same words to mean the same thing. If I say I'm a switch because I like to do some activities as a top and others as a bottom, and you say you're a switch because you are submissive bottom to one partner and you are the dominant top to another partner, if we're assuming the other is using the language the same way we are, we could have a big disconnect if we tried to develop or build something there. So the idea of what does that mean to me and what does that mean to you is a very important question that I think everybody should be asking regularly, not just when negotiating or building a dynamic, but as they go and learn about the lifestyle and themselves and everything like that.
Sure.
Relationships, it is we tend to use that term to mean the capital R relationship, some kind of committed, usually romantic, long-term pairing. But really, a relationship is just whatever interactions happen between two people that are characterized by some form of role that those people are taking on relative to one another. That doesn't always mean dominant and submissive roles. That doesn't always mean relationship romantically. I have relationships with both of you as my friends. I have a relationship with my sister. Our relationship roles are siblings. So we can still apply a lot of this to anything, to any kind of relationship. What do we want out of this interaction? Even if we're just meeting each other and learning how to become friends, these are still things we can talk about. And what do we want our friendship to look like? Or even things like that.
Sure.
The the other big one, and I realize I'm getting off on a bit of a soapbox rant here, but that's why you asked me to do this, right?
Right.
Exactly.
You knew what you were getting into. Is that particularly, again, we're talking here more in the context today of dominant and submissive as authoritative roles rather than top and bottom as activity roles and the kinky play, stuff like that. But I think it's still worth making the distinction that even though top and dominant are often correlated, they are often found together in the same person, there is no inherent link between the two. And same with submissive and bottom. One is about activity, the other is about relationship authority. They are not inherently linked or required. There are plenty of people out there that are dominant bottoms. They are the authority within their relationship, but they enjoy receiving the play or the sensations. There are times, for example, there are some kinds of sensations that I enjoy receiving. I am typically a dominant top and often a sadist, but there are some sensations that I enjoy receiving as a bottom. So if I tell my partner, who I am the dominant party of, I have the authority. If I tell them, go get the cupping set, I want you to put cups on my back so I can feel that, and then I lay down on the bed and they do that, I'm still the dominant party there. It's happening under my control, my authority, my instruction, and they are following my will. They are the top in that case because they are the one doing the sensation, doing the activity that I'm receiving, but they are no less submissive by following my command or instruction to do that. So I think it behooves us to remember those are separate spectra and often correlated but not inherently linked. And there's plenty of people that only exist within one of those and not at all. People that only have authority transfer dynamics and have no interest in kinky player activities, or vice versa. They're strictly kinky players. They love the activities, but they have no authority transfer relationship as well.
Sure.
So a lot of people will use those terms interchangeably. They will talk about, oh, this hot scene I saw in the dungeon where the dominant was beating the submissive with this awesome looking paddle they made. They may not be dominant and submissive, or it may not have been the dominant beating the submissive in that case. So it does behoove us to kind of separate those two. And there are a lot of other terms that may get used in place. Other people may use to identify themselves instead of dominant and submissive. There are other usually linked pairings that convey some measure of relationship and authority dynamic, whether it be master-slave, owner-property, owner-pet, handler and pet, daddy, mommy or daddy, and little or girl or boy, anything like that. So when we're speaking in generalities today, when I'm referring to the dominant partner, if you identify as a master in your relationship, feel free to substitute that term in your head for whatever helps you better contextualize it for your mind and your life. I'm not here to tell anybody, no, you are this, you have to use this term.
Fair.
And especially because, one of the most common questions that we hear is, what's the difference between, right? How many times you've both been, around the country doing this stuff for many years and teaching all kinds of classes everywhere. You've probably heard 1,000 times, what's the difference between a dominant and a master? What's the difference between a submissive and a slave? And the real answer to that question is the only differences are spelling and self-identification. That how one determines if they use one label over another or prefer one specifically versus others, why they use that label for themselves can be completely different reason to anybody else, and it doesn't make anybody more or less than another. And the reasons that I might use to say I'm dominant might be exactly the same reasons that somebody else says I'm a master.
Sure.
And then some third person could have completely different reasons for both. All of those are valid. I'm no less or no more than anyone else just because we don't define them the same way for ourselves. So again, if you use a term differently for yourself and find as you're listening to this to mentally substitute your own personal labels for the equivalent labels we're talking about here today, absolutely do that if it helps you reframe and integrate everything we're talking about. Yes. Absolutely. Labels are a great starting point. People like to dismiss them and say, well, labels are for soup cans, but it's still really helpful when you go into that aisle at the grocery store to see those labels and know what you're looking at. And they start broad, right? You can look at a label and go, okay, all three of these are chicken noodle soup. So broadly, there's some commonality. And then you turn it around and you look at the ingredients and you look at the nutritional labels and see how they differ and figure out if one is better or more right for you. It doesn't make the other chicken noodle soups wrong. They're just different and not what's right for you.
Yeah, and there's a big difference between the instant cup of soups and the condensed soups and...
Sure.
The ready-made.
And yeah, and okay, do I want chicken noodle soup? Or do I want beef and vegetable? Or do I want tomato soup or chili? We need these labels as a starting point so we can figure it out. It wouldn't do much good if we walked into the grocery store and the entire aisle was just blank cans with no labels and we have no idea what we're getting. And we're just going to, have to open every single can there to find the soup we want? That's not how it works. Labels are a very important part of our selection process, whether it be for soup or for finding a partner and a fulfilling relationship and finding ourselves. It's a very important part to develop our self-identity.
So I'm going to jump back quite a bit here. According to how you define things, authority transfer is a subset of power exchange. Am I understanding that correctly?
Sort of. I would say they more kind of run more or less parallel to each other rather than being a subset. Because the power exchange, it is exchanged. We both want to be giving power into this relationship to make the relationship meaningful, to make our partners feel meaningful and engaged in this relationship. And feel empowered, right? We want to, that's the goal. We want these relationships because we want to feel good and happy with each other by whatever measure or metric you're using for that kind of satisfaction, happiness, safety, comfort, whatever it may be. We want to have good, positive feelings about it. And if my efforts that I'm putting into my partner and my relationship make them feel good, and then they feel good and want to put their efforts in powers into the relationship to make me feel good and make the relationship thrive. That's exchanging power. Neither of us are losing anything. It's creating more. It's almost like sharing a flame from one candle to another. You're not losing anything from the first candle when you use it to light the second candle. But now you've got two flames and more light. On the other hand, authority, one of us is gaining or giving up some measure. So that is kind of a zero-sum game. To go back to my earlier example, my partner has given up the authority to make the decision for themselves whether or not to drink alcohol. That is authority that I have. I have the right within our relationship to make that decision. In this case, it's zero sum. They gave it up and I gained it. So authority and power certainly run alongside each other, but I would say they are more parallel than one being a subset of the other.
So in the use of the candle example, it would be literally like handing over my candle to you type thing.
Yes. Yeah, that's a better way. Yeah, authority would be you don't get to light that wick until I tell you you can, or I have to do it for you. And if I, for whatever reason, deem so, then no, maybe you don't get the candle, or I blow your candle out and you don't get that light anymore. That is very different than both of us having and sharing, and with it being power, we both have a candle. If mine goes out, you can light mine again as well from yours. Even though I have authority, that's something we can share, and neither of us have to lose on either side.
Well, that makes sense. Thank you.
Gotcha.
I think actually that's a really good analogy, and quite frankly, that's not one I had thought to use before, and I'm going to add that next time I teach this class. I think I'm going to have to add that candle analogy in there. So thank you for helping me develop.
No problem.
That's one of the things I love about teaching and these kind of discussions is we're always refining, and every single time I have these discussions, there's something little I can pick up and add, and I know every time I have a conversation with either of you, or I'm in a class that either of you are teaching, or if you're in one of my classes, there's always a little something different and new each time. So thank you for doing your part to make our relationship that much better and fulfilling. I feel better and more empowered because of your contributions.
Oh, thank you.
You're very welcome. I'm very much the same way. In the day or two after a class is when I make most of my changes to my class notes and improve it for next time.
Well, I was going to say, you usually like, oh, hey, what was that they, whomever had said, either a participant or just how the discussion went between either the two of us or with whoever was presenting, you're like, I like this. This needs to get added for, even my own class type thing. Yes. It's always very helpful.
Yeah, there's so much great information out there about, in this case, about DS relationships, authority transfer dynamics, and everything like that. There's actually a great quote I want to share here that I've got in my notes that I read many, many years ago on FetLife from a writer known as Innermind, that I think really sums up really well those distinctions between power and authority and transfer versus exchange. And what he wrote was, it's because the equality doesn't stem from the unbalance of power, but it stems from the ability of two equals to unequally distribute that power. Whether it's a temporary or longer-term exchange, it's still rooted in the fact that both sides are equal to each other. Both sides are just as valuable no matter their role, and more importantly, both are absolutely necessary to one another in order for there even to be a functioning dynamic.
Ooh, I like that.
I think that's great, and kind of where I said what parts are zero-sum, one party gains, the other gives up, versus both contributing. It's, to use another analogy, it's a lot like partner dancing, ballroom dancing. You tend to have a lead and a follow. One may be in a little bit more control as the lead, but they both have a very crucial role to play, and it's the interplay between the two, both contributing to make that dance work. If one was, if the follow was completely limp and passive, it's not going to be a good dance for the lead to just be dragging them limp around the dance floor. They still have to contribute.
It'd be like dancing with a sex doll.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Dancing with a mannequin is not very easy.
No.
But at the same time, the follow is not passive. They have to still be active and engaged with the dancing, respond to the lead's cues, but also be offering cues of their own for the lead to respond to. And maybe together they figure out their balance in the way they move, or as they move across this way of the dance floor, or you're giving me signs for this kind of move, and I'm the lead, but I put you into this kind of spin, or whatever it may be. Both the lead and the follow have a crucial part, and the dance would not work without either of them both being engaged in that.
Well, and even just watching, as as an outsider being able to watch something like that, not just in ballroom dancing, but in, seeing individuals who, participate in authority exchange, that give and take those cues, even if it's just subtle things, being able to see something like that, when it's done very well, it looks like poetry in motion for me.
Absolutely. In authority transfer relationships, one party may still have the right to say whatever it may be, but ideally, we would think as a good and conscientious partner, they should be taking their partner's state into mind. And sometimes it's just in a mood. You're having a bad day, whatever it may be. So maybe I need to use my authority to make sure that you're taking care of yourself. You're resting, or you're taking care of your mental health because you had a very stressful day, or you're upset about something. Now, I could still say, no, I said you need to do X, so you need to do X.
Mm-hmm.
But, that's still part of an important part of a relationship, is still responding to each other's needs. And maybe they ask, maybe my partner might not have the authority to say, I'm staying in, I'm not going out, I'm doing this. But I want them to ask,
Mm-hmm.
and then I can, tell them, because I can see what their needs are and make sure that I'm trying to foster that in a healthy and ethical manner.
Definitely. Sure. Let's totally see that.
So what do you think the people's
Yeah.
biggest mistakes are when it comes to authority transfer?
That is an excellent question. Broadly, I think assumptions. As I said earlier, it goes back to what does that mean for you and what does that mean for me? And I think a lot of it assuming that we're using the words to mean the same thing, or we're using, we may be using different words to mean the same thing. We may be using the same word to mean very different things. And if we don't talk about that and understand what each of us mean and figure out where we can unify that, then we're going to have, at best, some friction and confusion. At worst, it's going to explode completely in a horrible mess. What is, so a lot of it, one should go into it first asking themselves all these questions so they know what they're looking for in their relationship, in their interaction. And then they have a baseline, so when they start talking about these things with other people, they know how they can fit that or integrate that into themselves. So I have to kind of look at myself, think about myself, and say, what do I need in a relationship? What do I want in a relationship? What do I know I don't want? Is there anything I specifically want to exclude or not have in the relationship? What do I bring to the relationship? What do I think I have that a partner, someone else might be interested in or would benefit somebody else? And when I start to have ideas like that, then I can talk about those things and see if you're compatible in that way. If we're starting to talk about some kind of relationship or dynamic, is what you want out of a relationship compatible with what I want? Is what you need or what you don't want compatible with what I need or what I don't want? It doesn't always mean the same thing. Compatibility may mean complementary, right? Exactly like the authority transfer. If I know what I want and need in a relationship is to be the authoritative, dominant partner, then I probably don't want someone who wants exactly that same thing. I want somebody that wants the compliment. I want somebody that wants to be the submissive partner who has given me authority. So sometimes it's what do we need, what do we want, and we need to find someone exactly like that. Maybe it's somebody who has the same hobbies as you, somebody who has the same ethics or philosophies or political ideologies as you, and we want someone that is like us for compatibility. Sometimes there are things we need someone who is very much not like us to make that compatibility and balance. But I think assuming, again, when I say I'm dominant or I want to be the dominant in the relationship, does that mean the same thing to you? If I say I am a master, I want a slave, well, what does that mean? What do I see in my mind's eye as what does a master-slave relationship look like? What's my ideal image of the day-to-day of that relationship? That may be identical to what you picture, but you use the terms dominant and submissive or owner and property. So maybe we were just using different words to describe the same thing, but when we discuss it, we find out we're actually very compatible and do want the same thing, and maybe we just discuss the use of terminology and which one, what term or terms do or don't fit us together.
Gotcha. I mean, in my professional experience as a therapist, people making assumptions about what terms mean with their partner of even 20 years is a source of a lot of conflict in a lot of relationships, not just power exchange or authority transfer relationships.
Absolutely. I mean, we are still human. There is still human nature, and we are all, fallible and prone to misunderstandings and confusion and error and everything like that. So ideally, we should be able to talk about that, figure out where those disconnects are and how to repair or reconnect them.
Very fair.
Definitely.
And there's a lot of, once we build that relationship and we figure out we are compatible and what we want to build, or even we figure out where we aren't compatible and we figure out how to address that. What are we going to try and change to build compatibility on, or what are we just not going to handle and we're just going to exclude that from our relationship? When we start building that, then there's a lot of different ways a DS relationship can look. There's a lot of different things that we can bring into relationships that as an expression of that dynamic. Service is another term that is very commonly used in these contexts, and that is a very, very broad term, and what it can mean. What is service? What does that mean? And that can be directly doing something for another person. But that could be everything from the division of labor of housework, right? Do one of us have a specific duty to, I'm the one that does the dishes, or you're the one that does the laundry, or is it just done as it needs doing? Or is it done under instruction? Is it you do the laundry when I tell you? You empty the cat box when I tell you. It can absolutely be an expression, but any given service, any given activity can be an expression of dominance or of submission or service, right? Whether I say, as the dominant party, I say, go scoop the cat litter box, or as the submissive, you see it as an act of service to do it so I don't have to. Either way, the litter box is still getting scooped, and it sure doesn't matter to the cat. It's
True.
gestures. Maybe it's things like kneeling, or people that like to integrate particular positions into rituals or presentations. Not just kneeling, there are many others. Typically, those within Gorean relationships, it is very common. There is a whole series of kind of codified standard positions. Some people that aren't Gorean still use those or similar, and that can be an expression of submission or service. Perhaps there's a particular way you greet your partner when they get home, or a service you provide for your partner. But again, that service could be the submissive party serving the dominant party and let me do this for you. But it could also be the dominant doing that and still serving. Service is not a submissive only thing. It may be an expression of care and control, regardless of the actual activity. I've known a few different couples over the years that were in some measure of authority transfer that the same action of opening the car door, they had very different motivations around. No activity, yet to back up for a moment, kind of the header of this is no activity is inherently dominant or submissive. It is only what the motivation or mentality is behind why someone does it. So in the case of opening the car door to get in the car, one couple, the submissive was not allowed to open their own car door. They would stand there and wait until the dominant would come around, open the door so they could get in the car. For them, it was an expression of control. And you can get in the car when I say you can get in the car. I will open the door to tell you, otherwise you don't do it. The other couple, the dominant would wait for the submissive to open their door. That service for them was submission of, this is something I can do for you. I will open the door. The dominant would stand there and wait until the submissive. I had even heard times where the submissive would get in the car, look over, see the dominant still standing there outside next to the driver's side, get out of the car, have to walk around to open their partner's door so they could get in. They each had very different motivations behind it that were meaningful to them, of who had control or who gave up control, or what one was serving another with, but for exactly the same mundane action of opening the door and getting into the car.
Yeah, it's like the difference between a father opening a door for a child or a chauffeur opening a door for someone.
Absolutely. Those are both very different relationships, as we said, going back earlier. The relationship dynamic between a parent and child is going to be very different between than the relationship between an employer and a service employee, like a chauffeur and the person who has hired them to drive them around. So the activity of opening the car door is going to be very different reasons behind when each particular pair decides who does or does not touch that door handle.
And there's no one wrong way to do that, as long as it's meaningful between the people who it's been negotiated between and what they've determined to make it meaningful for them.
Absolutely. There's no one right way to do it all, and there's no one wrong way. Just because your way is different than mine or your motivation is different than mine doesn't mean either of us is wrong. And there are those people out there that will see both of us as wrong. You know, there's a lot of people where there's a million ways to do it wrong and only my way to
Yes.
do it right. That doesn't work for a lot of us. I will acknowledge that what's right for you is not necessarily what's right for me.
No.
But as long as that doesn't negatively affect one another, you can keep doing it your way, I'll keep doing it my way, and we'll both be fine. There are, in some ways, there's no wrong way to do it. And I say that kind of with the asterisk of, as long as everyone involved is consenting and acting ethically and it's been discussed, etc.
Yes.
It's worth reminding people that none of this is being done unilaterally. None of this is being done without engaged consent and discussion and negotiation. Because maybe you've discussed a negotiation and opening the car door doesn't matter to either of you, so it's not something you care to make a rule or protocol about. Maybe housework or particular household duties. One of you may have a specific reason. Maybe you really like to do the laundry because then you know it's getting done exactly the right way you want it done. So you say, yes, I will make the laundry my responsibility. Or I say, no, I hate doing dishes. I don't want to do. Somebody else has to do them. Or maybe it's just whatever. The sink is full. The dishes need to be done. I've got a few minutes, or I need stuff that's in there, so I'm going to have to wash them. So just because something is or is not important to us, or the way we show that importance, that care, and who does what, doesn't mean anybody else doing it differently is wrong. As I said, either way, the litter box still needs to be scooped, and it doesn't matter to the cats how it happens.
True. And it's also safe to say, like, anybody who is not aware of your protocols or anything like that should not be how do I put this? What's between you and your partner and what you've negotiated, outside people aren't always going to know and should not be, like, frowned upon, jumped on, or anything like that because they have no understanding of what's been negotiated between the two of you.
They shouldn't be sticking their nose in your business.
Yeah, that's
Is that what you're
exactly.
trying to say?
Yep.
Absolutely. Like I said, if it works for us in a safe and ethical and responsible manner, it doesn't matter if you like it or not. You don't have the right to tell me I'm doing it wrong or I need to do it differently. But at the same time, I think you actually are kind of segueing to a good point. Something else that's common is, what if we have particular rules or protocols that could affect others? How do we handle that? For example, something that may be more common at events, in large gatherings of people, at your kinky events, your dungeon parties, whatever it may be, especially when people might be in a more high protocol, rules or service oriented mindset with their partner, because there's somewhere that they can do that in quote unquote public. Something, say, like speech restrictions. It's not terribly uncommon that there may be restrictions on who a typically submissive party can speak with, or if someone needs to have approval or approval or the go-ahead from the dominant of that submissive before they can speak to the submissive. It's, if I went up to talk to someone not knowing that they had a speech restriction, if I didn't know that, they can't get mad at me for not honoring their protocol if I didn't know.
Uh-huh.
And at the same time, I shouldn't get mad at them for having a protocol I didn't know about either. That then becomes a dynamic, and it may be as simple as, would you please go ask my master if it's okay for you to speak with me? Or maybe it's, let me go talk to my master, see if he will give me permission to talk to you, right? Maybe it's something like that. And, if I have the right just as much as anyone to say, no, that's not a protocol I want to be a part of, and not talk to that person, right? If I don't feel I should have to or want to go seek a third party's approval or permission to speak to someone, that's part of the negotiation, right? They have put forth their terms. I can choose whether or not to accept those terms and continue that interaction under those terms. Or it may be, again, the other way. It may be, I try to speak to someone. They say, I can't speak to someone without my master's permission. Let me go get that permission, or see if they will give me that permission. And maybe the master says, no, don't talk to that person, or yeah, go ahead, it's fine, whatever it may be. If we know about them, it is still good and respectful to acknowledge that. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean, again, you have to abide by that. Right. It may be, I acknowledge that's a protocol you have. That's not something I want to be a part of, and walk away. Or it may be that I'm willing to do that. Friends of mine that are in a Gorean master-slave power exchange or authority transfer, they are both friends of mine, but a few weeks ago, at a party or an event here in town, earlier that day, the submissive partner had posted on their FetLife something along the lines of, Master and I are going to be in Gorean protocol tonight. If you see me wearing whatever particular thing they would be wearing, that means I am in protocol, and please do not talk to me without my master's approval. So when I saw them at the party and the submissive was wearing that particular garment, I knew what it meant for them. I had every right for myself to decide whether or not I wanted to follow that protocol and seek the master's approval before I could greet her. In this case, it was a cis male dominant and a cis female submissive. So in this particular case, when I'm using he and she, that's who I'm referring to because it's specific people.
Okay.
These are not inherent to the roles.
Right.
But I knew they wanted, before I approach her, they would want me to have his approval or ask for his approval. I had every right to decide whether or not I wanted to do that, and I could have ignored them all night while she was wearing that garment if I didn't want to engage. Now, they're still my friends, so I didn't mind respecting that because I knew it was important to them. So when I saw them, I made sure to ask him,
Sure.
may I say hi to her? May I talk to her? And we're friends. So he said, yes, of course. And she immediately gave me a hug and greeted me. But I knew that was important to them, so I could then factor that into whether or not I wanted it to be important to me.
Well, and in that aspect, you're also respecting, that they have publicly, well, privately, but publicly, stated ahead of time for those that, know them and who are aware of who they are. And, as a couple, that this was how the dynamic was working tonight. So publicly, being at an event, this is how we would like you to approach us if you know us. If we didn't know you, then, we might not have been aware of that. And, hopefully that's one of those like nice, gentle corrections of like, hey, if you're not aware,
Yes.
this is what this means and this is what you need to do. Would you like to continue further?
Exactly.
Which is super helpful and rather appropriate. I have had the experience of walking up to somebody and saying hello because I was going to be introduced to them. And their first comment was, I am a master, you are a submissive, I'm not talking to you. Not even, where's your sir? Or anything to that effect. And that was extremely off-putting for me in the sense of that's your dynamic with, how you interact with submissives. I was being introduced to you as an equal because, of the setting and where we were and such like that. So that's one of those, like, I'm always in the back of my head of if I don't know, or even if I do know that you're a master, if I'm being introduced to you as an equal in that aspect at first, like, this is a different thing. We're not engaging that way.
Absolutely. I can't be held responsible for not knowing what I don't know. And now in your example of I am a master, I will not talk to a submissive or slave. I'm very glad that those kind of people are becoming fewer and further between. They are certainly becoming relics of the past. Because I have met people like that think because they are a master or a dominant, that they are somehow above all submissives or slaves or anyone that considers, or anyone they see as lower than them, which is absolutely not true. As you said, we are equals until we consciously decide to divide that inequality among us.
Yeah.
So that is something else I want people to think about and consider, and both sides of that. In the just because I am dominant does not mean I have any authority or station above anybody else, nor just because they are a master does not mean that they automatically have any authority or station over me. Kind of the you're a dominant, but you're not my dominant. Kind of mindset.
Right.
And same as you might be a submissive. You're not my submissive. We haven't discussed any kind of authority transfer or you deferring to me. So don't automatically assume that because I'm dominant that you should or must act a certain way around me. As we build a relationship or friendship or rapport, and over time, then for us that may develop. I can think of friends of mine that over time they would still insist on calling me sir because I'm dominant and they are not. So for them, they always would. And even though I never asked them to, and in fact, I would sometimes tell them, you don't need to call me that. I'm not your sir. But as we got to know each other and built friendship over time, I knew what it meant to them, and as it was a sign of their respect for me as not just a dominant, but as a person. So I was willing to accept it because then it became something personally relevant between the two of us. It wasn't calling me sir because I'm a dominant. It was calling me sir because it was a person who has earned that respect from them.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
I was gonna say we've been in places where Rabbi and I are teaching, and they've had folks who are the serving submissives for the weekend who are providing service of making sure rooms are set up and such like that. And he always gives everybody a sideways look when they are like, "Is everything okay, sir? Is the room to your liking, sir?" And I usually get an eye roll and just a little sigh, because I know it from a different perspective, from the leather community of just, even general, just calling folks sir if they're submissive, as you are the leader in the room as an educator, you are helping do this, that, or whatever. But for him, it is still rather amusing and gives him an eye roll and pause. So I understand it from a place of respect, and I know he does as well, but that is not how he identifies.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And I've known the two of you. We've been friends for several years now. So if I call him sir,
Yes.
we know it's all tongue-in-cheek for us, and we will all have a laugh. I will probably do it, over the top and very egregiously because I'm making my friends laugh. That's the dynamic and the rapport that we have together, and is very different than anyone else calling Rabbi sir.
Well, I mean, for me, there's two reasons I don't like it. One, Sir Rabbi just doesn't sound right at all. It sounds almost redundant.
Layering up the
Pretentious.
titles is too convoluted.
And second, most of the time when somebody's calling me sir, they're following it up by, "You're making a scene and we're going to have to ask you to leave."
You need to leave. Sir, not followed by you need to leave.
So, I mean, I don't dislike it, but I'm just not comfortable with it for those reasons.
No, I totally understand. And that's an important distinction, is what's right for you. What makes you feel good or comfortable or validated or safe, whatever that kind of positive feeling you're looking for. What's right for you? And if I like to be called sir, or only in certain contexts, or only by certain people, or don't like to be called, or specifically tell people not to, any of that's okay, because that's what's right for me. For me personally, if somebody feels that if it's coming from a genuine place, and I can tell they want to call me that because it is a measure of respect for me, then I'm more apt to accept it as a kind gesture from them, versus somebody that's doing it because they think every dominant should be called sir. That's not what vibes with me. If it's genuine and it's because of the rapport we have, I'm much more okay. But I also, virtually other than my own partner that I am in a authority transfer relationship with, there is nobody that I ask to call me sir.
Oh,
Because
yeah.
that's just for me. Sometimes these titles are very important and very personal. master, for example. I am in a master-slave relationship with my partner. I do not want to be called master by anyone else. I will specifically tell other people, don't call me that, even to the point where sometimes I have referred to that as a hard limit.
Mm-hmm.
Because for me, that is a label associated with my specific relationship. I am their master. I am not a master. I am not your master. So
Mm-hmm.
it is no more, in my mind, it is no more appropriate for you to call me master than it would be for you to call me husband, because that's my relationship with them, not with you.
Definitely makes sense. Yeah, there's, for me, I've, met some individuals, and they have been introduced to me as, sir so and so, or daddy so and so, or master so and so. And if I'm introduced to them as, master, as being their title, then that's typically what I will use, just out of, not, hey, we're in this relationship together, but it's, either a title that you have and this is how you're being introduced. But if I'm introduced to even somebody with the title of master casually, then I am not going to just randomly pull out, sir, master, whatever for the individual, because that is not, as, we've discussed, that's not, what the engagement is or anything like that.
Right. If they say,
Mm-hmm.
hi, I'm Master Bob, I will politely
Yes.
say, hi, Bob, it's nice to meet you.
Mm-hmm.
They're not my master. That's not a station
Mm-hmm.
that they have relative
Yes.
to me. I suppose the one exception to that would be, again, tongue-in-cheek, doing it with the right people that I know would find it funny. I suppose if I hunch my back and say it like Igor and say, yes, master, and go slinking off, then I might still call him master. Yes. Yes.
Dobby
So,
needs to give you a sock
next
then.
time the two of you are in town, don't be surprised. But again, as established, that's the dynamic that we have. We know it's genuine friendship, and we enjoy doing that
But of course.
for ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
that's the rapport that we have built and the understanding that we have come to over the years as friends.
Mm-hmm.
I might be inclined to call somebody master if their last name was Bates.
Yes. I suppose.
Just maybe.
So I think...
Sorry.
If we actually throw it back to one of your questions earlier, Rabbi, about we were talking the assumptions and the folly of making assumptions on how these kind of dynamics work. There are a lot of other things that can be taken for granted that people assume are a part of it or they have to do, and many don't. So again, just because others do it doesn't mean you have to if it doesn't work for you. Like punishment dynamics, for example, are something that many people, quite frankly, don't do. A lot of people, I think, misunderstand punishment and reinforcement as a whole, and punishment, the way they think it is or should be done, doesn't correct the problem. At most, punishment or a negative consequence, a negative reinforcement, it doesn't reinforce the good or proper or correct behavior for the sake of itself. It only dissuades the incorrect behavior, often because you don't want to be punished again. You fear that you don't do the correct thing because it's good and correct. You do it so that you don't get punished. Whereas a lot of times, if something is not being done correctly, a rule is being broken or not being followed, whatever it may be, there's a reason behind that. And it's something we might be able to discuss and address and fix so we can prevent it from being a problem. Is it that I asked you to do something and you forgot? Maybe we need to work on reminders or keeping notes to ourselves to remember to do things. Did you not have time? Maybe we need to work on scheduling and use our calendar and our date books better to make sure that everything is still getting done in the right amount of time. Or was it a willful disobedience? Did you deliberately decide, I'm not going to do that thing? Because then there's a different problem that we need to discuss and address. So we can talk about it and figure out what we can do. Maybe the rule was unsustainable. Maybe it turns out that's a bad rule and that doesn't actually work. And we need to figure out something else for that situation, or whatever that rule was meant to handle or enforce. Maybe we need to address it in a different matter. And maybe the problem was actually with me. I didn't give clear enough expectations or instructions of what I wanted done. You know, again, you don't know what you don't know. Can I get mad at you for doing the laundry wrong if I don't tell you what I see as the right way and how I want you to do it? No. That doesn't mean
try.
you broke the rule if you didn't know. I
Right.
can then give you specific instructions and specific detail for you to follow, and then next time you can do it that way. And if you don't, we can talk about why. Did you forget? Maybe we need to write down the instructions. Did you not have time? Maybe we need to see if we can schedule our day better. Whatever it may be. Punishment may not necessarily do anything to correct any of these problems in so much as it fixes the problem. Punishment just gives you something to avoid so that you're kind of, you know, it only makes you go right because you know you don't want to go left.
Sure.
So punishment dynamics are not something that everybody needs. It's something a lot of people don't. It's usually an opportunity to talk about what went wrong and how we can fix it, ideally so it doesn't happen again and it doesn't become a problem. There are some people that do use punishment, particularly some sort of physical punishment, whether it be spanking but it may also be things like more domestic discipline. It may be sometimes even, you know, standing in the corner silently for a while, or writing lines of, I will not do X, I will remember to do Y 100 times. There are some people that use that so they can give themselves a sense of closure on the matter. That's after they've talked about it, they've figured out what they can do, they've done what they can to resolve, but maybe there is still a sense of guilt or something where the punishment isn't corrective, it's symbolic.
Oh, yeah.
It shows we are closing this, we have dealt with this, and don't need to deal with it anymore. It can be used symbolically. I think then it has more value than if you were actually using it to attempt to correct an unwanted behavior or situation by negative reinforcement.
Yeah, I mean, there are definitely people out there who feel like when they did something wrong, they must be punished, or they will dwell on whatever they did wrong forever until they receive that punishment, in which case, you know, I'm all for the punishments. But punishments for the sake of punishments, not so much. I think in our many years,
and same with rules. Rules for this, a lot of people that are new to DS relationships or authority transfer think we need to have rules, right? That's a part of the structure. What rules should I have for my submissive? What rules should we have in our relationship? Rules should give structure to serve the relationship and the people in it and bring some kind of benefit or order or structure. Rules for the sake of rules don't help. What does it matter if you serve my dinner in a very specific way if neither of us care, as long as you made a good meal and we can sit down and have dinner? do I care which plate it's on and how many times you spin around clockwise before you set it in front of me? That may not matter to me. So that rule would be meaningless. It may matter to other people.
Sure.
The rule about opening the car door, maybe one way or form of that is meaningful to us, and we do that, but it's not inherent to the rule itself.
If it's not meaningful, then the rule isn't going to be enforced either.
Exactly. Every rule you have is going to take effort to maintain and keep it enforced and make sure it's working. And maybe that's effort I just don't want to do, right? Quite frankly, sometimes I just don't care about that stuff. Why do I need to make a rule about it? It's just going to take time and mental labor for me. Rules should be serving the relationship. They should be serving the people. And what can it do to make things better? Maybe the rule will help get better. Again, maybe we have rules around using your calendar and maintaining a better schedule so that you're more timely and still getting your responsibilities done. Maybe there's rules about homework if you're in school, or career advancement, things like that will enhance our lives, make something better. There's bad habits you want to break, or better, healthier habits that you want to develop and foster. Rules can be great for that. But what good is a bedtime if you didn't have a problem with staying up too late and not getting enough sleep and being out of focus at work tomorrow? If you didn't have that problem, instituting a hard bedtime isn't really going to add any benefit. And eventually, it's probably just going to be an annoyance that we're going to resent because you were in the middle of doing something and you have to stop, or you have to leave your friends to be home by curfew, or it just interrupted. And again, it's one more thing that we have to focus on maintaining and enforcing. And if it's not giving a measurable benefit to us, why are we bothering?
Absolutely. I mean, and when you have a rule and you're not enforcing it because it doesn't have any meaning, then you're also eroding your own authority.
Absolutely, yeah. If I have the rule and I don't care about it, why is that rule there? But does that mean that I don't care about the other rules too? And does that mean that you might think, well, if he doesn't really care about X or Y, then I can probably also get away with Z because he's not really enforcing that rule either. And that can just encourage all of us into various bad habits.
Yeah. I mean, rules need to have meaning. They need to have purpose. Sometimes that purpose is to reinforce the submission or be symbolic of the submission or something like that. But it has to have some meaning or some purpose.
Yes. And maybe it did, and it no longer does. You don't have to stick with it. Just because we had that rule before doesn't mean we still need it. Maybe it doesn't work for us. Maybe we fixed the problem and now you're in that good habit and that's ingrained in you and you don't need external enforcement for it, whatever it may be. So now maybe it's something that we do, or it becomes like one of those weird obscure laws that's technically still on the books, but when was the last time anybody was arrested for having an ice cream cone in their back pocket on a Sunday, you know? It's still technically there, but it doesn't matter, and we all know, and it's okay. So just because a rule is there doesn't mean it has to be enforced if there's no benefit to it.
I mean, I think in our many years together, I've only implied or had one punishment with Little Bit, and it was very situational, and I would actually be surprised if she remembered it. And she stepped away from him, so she's not going to chime in right now. But yeah, I mean, because most of the time it is, as you were saying earlier, that it has, it's not so much you need to follow the letter of the rule, but the spirit of it. And if it is not working, why isn't it working?
Yeah. And talk about that. What's the difference in that? If we have a rule in place, what's the letter of the rule and what's the spirit of the rule, and which one matters? Maybe specificity matters, and let's say, or even in a command or an instruction given that doesn't have a rule. For example, let's say I ask my partner to get me a shirt while I'm getting dressed, right? And maybe they just go and grab one of my t-shirts from the drawer and it's fine. Or I tell them which shirt to get me, or one of the good ones out of the closet. And they do that. That's exactly what I asked. Maybe they also come back not only with that shirt, but they come back with an undershirt and a pair of socks. Because maybe it's like, well, you're getting ready. I thought I'd be helpful. You're going to need an undershirt. You're going to need a pair of socks. So I went ahead and grabbed them for you. So that might be good because the spirit of the instruction is help me get ready, help me get dressed. Or maybe it is the letter of the law and I say, no, go put those back. I asked you to get me a shirt. I didn't say anything about getting me socks. That's not what I asked for. Please don't assume that you know more than what I asked for. That is something that can be discussed, whether it be ongoing or situational as it comes up. But the difference between what's the letter of the law or instruction versus what is the intent and spirit behind it can be a relevant distinction.
Sure.
So while you had stepped away a little bit, we talked that, in our many years together, I think I've only given you one punishment. Do you even remember what that was?
You mean besides marriage?
Oh, well, yeah.
There's that.
Yeah, there's that too. One, yes, I got to wear, weighted balls, actually. The Benoit balls. It was for something.
Oh, okay, there's been two now.
Well, see, clearly, punishment like that is not something that's important to either of you.
No.
Because neither of you accurately remember when it was applied or what for or what it was meant to correct or enforce, and you've been doing fine in your relationship without it. So punishment isn't a required part of the dynamic for you and something you opt to do without.
Did I actually make you do that? I think I just threatened to make you
you had me wear them because, you had me bring them.
Okay.
And I had to insert them in my car at the restaurant that we were meeting at.
Oh, yeah.
Because you stood right there and made sure that I inserted them.
I was thinking that I made you march in a parade with them.
No. Nope, I didn't march in any parade with those.
Okay.
But you had threatened that one, and I was like, that's probably not a brilliant idea, because I think that parade would have been the Pride March parade, which was 2.5 miles.
That sounds brilliant to me.
I mean, the threats I've heard you come up with, nothing would surprise me.
No, not at all.
No, the one I was thinking of when we were at our first event together, and I told you to call and make sure we got a late checkup, and you waited until it was too late to request a late checkout. So your punishment is you had to pack up the car while I went to the class.
Yeah, there was that, except, we figured out afterwards that wasn't communicated well either on my end. You didn't communicate that well on my end, but yes. And I took responsibility for it.
Yeah.
And I did all of the packing of the car, and including making sure the car got jumped because the battery had died on the car too. So I got to do all of the things, which was extra.
It's your car.
We took mine because you were like, I don't think it's all going to fit in mine with an extra person. Just one extra person versus just you singular going.
Yeah, I did have that problem for a while. It's the problem when you do too many types of play. At some point, you not only just need a bigger play bag, you need a bigger car for all the play bags.
Yes. We've had to compromise on that because, the dead body toy box that you have just is not a good idea to take with us to events anymore. Especially if I'm the one that's going to be carrying them all. Now for different reasons. Not as punishment.
All right. Well, as we're getting close to the end of our time, is there anything else we need to talk about with authority transfer?
I think it's really just kind of driving back that main point of it can be whatever the people involved want it to be, what they want to build together. Its relationships should be a collaborative process, and these should be ongoing discussions. These should be things that are regularly talked about and considered and modified as necessary, because ultimately it's what can we build together that will be the best for us. And in that, another quote I have here, or rather, this is actually paraphrased. This is an adapted quote, but from John Warren, who is the author of The Loving Dominant. And that's, if you say, I want to be a slave, I'll say, good for you. But if you say you want to be my slave, I'll say, sit down, because we have a lot to talk about.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. Okay, so doing this inside the actor's studio style. You love me for this. As you roll your eyes. All right. What's your favorite toy in your toy bag?
Ooh, oh, God. I mean, is it a cop-out to say my sense of creativity?
Yeah, it is. Yep. Uh-huh.
I mean, the things I can do just with my hands without even needing a separate object.
Well, you can't keep your hands in your toy bag, so...
The item that you can keep in your toy bag.
Probably my rope. It is incredibly versatile. With a little bit of creativity, there's almost nothing I couldn't do, including things you wouldn't think of with rope. We tend to think of rope for bondage and tying and restraint, but I can use it as an impact toy if I want. And I can get a lot of different sensations depending on whether it's out in a strand or bundled tightly into a tight pack. The kinds of bondage I can do, the types of restraint, I can create so many different kinds of sensations and feelings, both physical and emotional, and use it to connect in any number of different ways. It is remarkably versatile, so I think my favorite, I will go ahead and say if I can say, count my rope kit as one.
That's fine.
Yeah, I'll allow it. So, my favorite question to ask people is, if you had to, which Muppet would you have sex with and why?
Oh. That is, there's important things to consider here. Probably Janice from the Electric Mayhem. She seems like she might be up for some interesting stuff.
Mm-hmm.
For sure, really?
For sure,
I don't know, maybe
really?
it's just the big teeth. I don't know. But I don't know. If it's for sex and pretty typical. See, if you were to play with, who would I want to do a scene in a dungeon with? Probably Gonzo. Because he would just be game for some weird and goofy stuff. And I know the kind of stuff you like to do, Rabbi, and I've seen your scenes and the stuff you come up with in the dungeon, and that's exactly the kind of vibe that I think Gonzo and I could run with.
See, now I know a real life in-person person named Gonzo, and I'm pretty sure that they would be all down to fit that description for their name, too.
I mean, Gonzo is my favorite type of porn, so...
Oh my gosh. All right, 3 words that describe your play.
3 words that describe my play.
Mm-hmm.
Ooh, creative. Surprising.
Mm-hmm.
That's one I get a lot. And still fun, I think. Even if it's not a quote unquote fun type of scene, it's still some kind of fun for us, and we enjoy what we did. We enjoyed the time together, and it's under that kind of fun.
Nice.
So I think, yeah, I will say, I don't even remember what my first one was before creative and fun.
Surprising.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, I've had a lot of people over the years say things like, "Oh, I thought Dave was such a nice, sweet guy, and then I saw him play, and they're scared, they're mean." You know, when I know other sadists that tell me they're afraid of some of the shit that I've done, like, that's a badge of honor.
I would say then that fits your biggest compliment in kink.
So, what is your secret origin story into kink?
I think mine's pretty typical, not super secret, of a long time had kind of been comfortable with stuff off the beaten path, and maybe that probably dovetails pretty well with why I've been, you know, into things like the Rocky Horror Picture Show for so many years as well. They are kind of related, close by subsets, subcommunities, but that have or can have a fair amount of overlap between them. But I don't know, I was just always kind of comfortable with that. So when I found other people and friends in college that were also those kind of people, and we enjoyed that kind of stuff, and then one of those kind of friends introduced me to FetLife after it had been around for a couple of months, and I found the greater kink community here in St. Louis and what it has become online, and became active and have made some lifelong relationships and friends and become very active and involved and engaged in it. But I don't think there's any secret origin or one specific inciting event or point of genesis for me. It just sort of happened because I guess I was just kind of that kind of person who found himself going that way.
Nice.
Not that I recall. I might have done that to a few people, but I'm just not that into being bitten myself, so.
Fair. All right, ask your favorite question, and that'll be our last one.
Okay. What's your favorite curse word?
Fuck is just so wonderfully versatile. There's so many ways to use it, and so many ways to create new ways to use it. It's just too versatile. Vocally, just like the sound and the mouthfeel are something about is really satisfying. Just ending on that hard consonant, that hard K, it's satisfying to say, it's satisfying to hear, and it's just so versatile. There is no replacement for the proper good use of the word fuck.
Nice. Yes, yeah, definitely agreeable.
Fun fact about the word fuck. Growing up, my childhood phone number spelled out fuck. So that was probably the first curse word I was aware of, because people were always calling and telling me about it.
Right. It's like, hey, did you know your phone number is 634 fuck? That's got to be great on your form. That really explains a lot about you. Now that I think about you, that probably explains a few things.
Well, but yeah, between that and my birthday being 6'9", yeah.
Nice.
I'm surprised it took me as long to find the kink community as it did. All right, well, thank you, Dave, for being on the show and talking to us about authority transfer.
Thank you for having me. It was great to
you.
be here. I was thrilled when you asked me to do so. I was happy to do it, and it's been a ton of fun.
Yay!
For our listeners, upcoming synagogue in-person and virtual classes We have classes on electroplay, both with and without the violet wand, reading body language, dollar store domination, knife play, quills, chain fisting, body drumming, and a whole bunch of other stuff. Check out our website for dates, locations, and where to take them online. But that is it. That's our show. Say goodnight, little bit.
Good night, little bit.
Good night, little bit.
Follow us on Facebook, FetLife, Twitter, Tumblr, and YouTube as Synagogue BDSM, and on Instagram and TikTok as Synagogue Kink. If you enjoyed or learned something from this podcast, consider making a donation via PayPal, Cash App, Venmo, Patreon, or Ko-fi. Username Synagogue, or find those links to all of those on our website, synagoguebdsm.com. Remember, that's synagogue with an I. Also on the website, links to past episodes, upcoming classes, book us as educators, shop our store, and more.
Synagogue hosts and guests are subject matter experts but are not the expert. We believe that, outside of violating consent, there is no wrong way to do kink, except to think your way is the only way. This show is presented from a RAC, risk-aware consensual kink point of view, and not SSC, safe, sane, consensual, because every individual's definition of safe is different based on their own risk profile. The use of the word safe on this show fits our definition of safe, and that does not have to be your definition. Opinions expressed by guests on the show are those of the person expressing the opinion, not of the show.
Just a reminder, we try to make our content as inclusive as possible, regardless of gender, orientation, role in the lifestyle, etc. But we do inherently speak from our own point of view. For the most part, substitute our identity with your own to make it work. We want to know when we make a mistake, so we can learn and grow from those mistakes. So if you feel like we did say something that is genuinely offensive, we encourage you to let us know. Reach out to us with your questions, comments, or concerns via our website or call us at 469-269-0403.
Brought to you today by the letters and the number.
San Diego High School Football Room!